everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Business Unboxed. As you know, I am an accountant here in New Zealand, and this is my business podcast. Now, I do have to say I do have a bit of an exciting announcement for this episode, and that is that recently I did become a chartered accountant. So, if you have been following the podcast for a wee while, you would know that I was going through my CA study. So the first few years of me actually doing this podcast were a bit sporadic when it came to putting up episodes and that kind of thing, because I was trying to study. I may have even been finishing off my degree when I started this podcast, so certainly been a bit of a journey, but here we are. I am now a chartered accountant, so yay! Right, so besides that personal announcement of excitement, let's get straight into it. So I do have just one more episode to post after this one for the 2024 year of Business Unboxed, which is sad but also exciting, because if you have been tuning in, you would know that there are some exciting things to come from the podcast next year. So if you do want to find out what those are, I do highly recommend that you follow or subscribe on YouTube if you're watching, hello, and see what comes out of next year. It's going to be exciting, it's going to be good. I feel like it's going to take us in a new direction, but also covering off everything you guys love to hear and love to learn. So, right, let's get into the second last episode of 2024, which is going to be about goal setting for your business success and setting yourself up really for 2025. Again, I do have some base notes over to my left that I'll refer to every now and again to keep me on track, because we do know I'm a bit of a rambler, so if I get off topic I can kind of talk for a bit, and I don't want to talk forever. I do have some small smidgen of a life outside of this podcast that I'd like to get back to. So, the first one is obviously why we want to goal set. So, for instance, I just like to take it back to basics. If you don't set a goal, how do you even know what you're trying to achieve? Or how do you even know where you're going if you don't have an idea? So some people might associate goals with, the SMART goals, which we'll get into later in this episode. But for me, even though we do need those principles in place, goal setting is about having something we want to get to. It's about having an idea of where you want to go, and without having that even in your head as a slight idea for a start is going to hold you back, because if you don't know where you want to go in business specifically, what are you even doing in your business? Like, surely you want to get more sales, or you want your customer satisfaction to get higher, or you want to launch a new product. Like, if those things are things that you are thinking about in your brain, you're already one step into your goal setting process, because you're thinking about what you want to achieve. And that's obviously the whole point of goal setting, is figuring out what you want to achieve and then putting steps in place in order to help yourself get there. So that's kind of why we want to set goals. Next is, how do I put this? So obviously with goal setting, you're always looking forward. And I have mentioned before that at this time of year, not only do we want to be looking forward, but we want to be reflecting on what we've done in the past. So an equal portion of looking forward and goal setting for the future is looking back at what you've achieved, what your goals were for last year, what have you achieved, what you haven't achieved. That might help you create more structured goals and more achievable goals going forward. For instance, if you'd planned last year to increase your sales by 100% or something for this year, but you've only done 25%, if you didn't reflect back on that and think, obviously was quite short on that goal, you wouldn't know, and you might say, yeah, I want to do another 100% this year. I can definitely do it this year. What makes you think that this year's going to be any better than last year? If you hit 25 last year, maybe go for 30, 40 or 50 this year. You know what I mean? Like, we've got to look back at where we were. Also, there might be some that you didn't achieve and that you want to try and achieve this year. Or there might be things that you tried last year and you realize that actually that's not really what you want to do, and so you don't want to do that this year. So it's just reflecting on what you were doing in the past, what you did last year, looking at what you've learnt over the year and how you want to apply that into the year going forward and setting your goals going forward. So a bit of that going on, looking back to kind of work on the future. Another point that I want to talk about is obviously SMART goals. So those are specific, measurable, attainable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound or timely, I think. So obviously specific means you've got a specific thing written down. It's not wide open, that's up for interpretation. Measurable obviously means that there's some way that you can actually measure that you've achieved the goal. Achievable or attainable, because there's a few kind of words that get flipped around with the SMART goals. That obviously means you're able to actually do it. So for me, for instance, I couldn't then say for my personal life, next year I want to learn how to fly. It's not obviously achievable, so there's no point in setting that goal because it's physically impossible. So making sure that it is something like we talked about when you're doing the reflections. If something seems really out of reach from last year, chances are it may not be in reach this year. So making sure it's actually an achievable goal, because mentally we don't want to be setting goals that are so far up the ladder that we never achieve them, and then, kind of defeats your motivation because you're not actually getting anywhere. You feel like you might as well give up. So just setting an attainable goal that you can actually get in the period that you want to set the goals for. Next is relevant. So obviously if you're in business, it needs to be relevant to what you're trying to do, and timely or time bound means it's got some sort of form of time that you're going to achieve it over. So for instance, instead of saying, which was an example I had before, you want to increase your sales, or even if you want to increase your sales by 100%, you've got a couple of those factors in there, but you don't have all of them. For instance, when do you want to have that done by? Is that actually achievable? Probably not. Maybe aim for 50%. And then is it in the quarter? What starting figure do you want to use? Is it last year's starting figure? Is it this year's starting figure? If you want to set it for a quarter, then do you want 25 increase on the previous quarter, or just 25% increase from the starting point of the year? I was just thinking about all those kinds of things. So you might want to say, I want to achieve 100k of sales in the next 12 months. Now, if your sales were only 1,000 last year, maybe not achievable. But if your sales were 50, 60, 70, very achievable. You've got your time set. It's a relevant thing that you want to achieve. It's obviously, put more effort in to grow your sales. So that's a pretty good goal to have. So it's just thinking about, lots of people talk about smarter goals. I think I may even have a whole podcast on goal setting. So definitely, I think I go more in depth on those details. So definitely go and check that out. It may be from a couple of years ago now, which is kind of why I'm touching on this, to kind of bring it up to speed a little bit. But yeah, definitely things like that. We just want to make it achievable. So recently, a personal example, I have changed roles. So in changing roles, obviously you have to come up with a new development plan, because HR like for you to, have a development plan, making sure you're working towards something, and I like having goals as well. And I had to come up with a goal, but I had to make sure that it was something that could be kind of we know that it could be achieved. So it's getting certain accesses in the systems and whatnot is what I picked, because we know if I've achieved it or not, because either I'll have that access or I won't have that access kind of thing. So it's just making sure that it's something, and obviously my time frame was by the end of the review period, which is a year. Right, but back into business and into the next step, which is in businesses, if you do set up a business goal, there are things called KPIs. Now again, I've talked about most of these things in a number of my different podcasts, so this shouldn't be new to you if you are somebody that listens frequently. If you are a new listener and you don't know what a KPI is, it is essentially a key performance indicator. some people do get that mixed up with goals, and they think that key performance indicators are goals, because quite often, I think, not so much in New Zealand, but maybe more in like America, potentially Europe, unsure on that one, don't quote me. I've only got experience in New Zealand, but from what I've heard things and seen things, like for instance, like sales teams might have KPIs, so you might misinterpret that to mean those are goals that they have to achieve. But essentially what they are is, here's your goal, these are your indicators to show that you've met the goal. So when we're talking about the sales example, there might be key things underneath that help prove to you that you're on your way to achieving the goal, or that you're going to meet your goal. So they're not goals in themselves, but they work together with goals to help you achieve where you want to go. And so an important part of tracking that is mapping it out, having your goal up here, having your KPIs, so you know you've actually achieved the goal. So just back to the smarter, so when we're talking about the measurable aspect of the smarter goals, however you want to word it, there's a couple of different variations. That measurable part ties heavily into your KPIs, because they're going to be, if your measure is I want to get 100k in sales for the year, then your KPIs are going to heavily link on how do we know that we've reached that 100k amount. They're things that are going to show us that we're indicating that we're going to get there. You know what I mean? So that's kind of how they work. It's also helpful if you want to maybe break down, if you do have something like that 100k a year sales, breaking it down maybe into quarters to make it seem a little bit more achievable. If you are starting and you've only done 50k last year and you're like, well, I really want to do 100k, but it does seem like a lot, maybe break it down per quarter. Or if you want to go down to that monthly level and track it monthly, it might just seem a little bit more attainable. Up to you, because some people work differently. Some people might think, oh, a month, that's not enough time for me to really know if I'm working towards my goals or not. A quarter might be a bit more, or a half yearly might be good enough. Like if you get up to 50k by halfway through your financial year or calendar year, however you like to manage that, or whatever your financial year is, and then you've got your second half to get the rest. Whatever works for you, as long as you're making progress and you're tracking it and you're getting there. Which leads us into the last part of the episode, which is tracking your goals. So again, I've talked about a few different methods of tracking goals and KPIs, and I've talked about ways that you can do all that kind of stuff and gone into detail about it. So from a high level, there's plenty of different ways. I like to use Asana for my personal goals. Also, I kind of set it up so it was like projects for different areas of my life. So one project might have been my career. And I recently was able to tick off the fact that I wanted to become a chartered accountant. And now I've done that. So I'm able to tick off that project as being done. But under that project, I had set myself tasks that were kind of like, pass this paper, pass this assessment, get through this, tick off this, because there's a few different steps to becoming a chartered accountant. And that's how I kind of broke it down into those key performance indicators. If I was ticking those off and getting those done, then I knew that I was on the right track to getting my overall goal of being a chartered accountant, essentially. So that was one project. I set up another project that was, what was it? Fitness-wise, I had a couple of fitness goals that I wanted to reach. Have I stuck to those? No, but that's okay, because we can't achieve all of our goals. We're only human, and sometimes we don't meet them, and sometimes other things need to take priority, like mental health over other things in other areas of our life. But just setting up different examples. You might want to eat healthier, you might want to lose weight, you might want to get stronger, you might want to be faster, career-wise, business-wise. You might want to redo your website. You might want to get your 100k sales. So under that project of your 100k sales, you might have, maybe it's introducing a new product. And maybe that's part of how you get to your 100k sales is you finish off a product you've already been using, you want to market that, and that's going to help you get to your sales. Or maybe you're going to do a new way of promoting things, or maybe you're going to go do a market, and that's going to help you get some more sales. You didn't do markets last year, but you want to put in the effort this year to go to markets, get your product out there, or you want to do ads somewhere, or whatever it is. You break that down into smaller achievable things so that you know you're making progress towards it. And so that's one way, Asana, that's how I kind of do it. You could do a spreadsheet. There are some add-ons to accounting software that you can get that I believe, I can't think of the name now, but there's a few add-ons for Xero that you can get that kind of, I don't know if I've really seen any that do KPIs down to that level, but there's definitely some that you can track your budget. So if a lot of your goals for the business are financial based, which I have a separate podcast, I think, on the balanced scorecard. I think I did a whole one on that not too long ago. That's more about trying to create goals across a range of topics within your business, which I think is the best approach. But for this episode, we're just highballing it. So sticking with the sales and financial stuff, an easy way to track that is if you get like a dashboard attachment onto your Xero and you put in your budgets at the start of the year, and then you might be able to track your budget versus actual, and your budget might be some of your goals and your targets potentially. So that's another way you can do it. There's also Notion. They're coming out with some really great stuff at the moment, and I may in the future have some links for you guys to go in and have some goal trackers and things that you can purchase through Notion. So keep your eyes and ears open for that. But there's a bunch of different ways. Honestly, there's probably apps, plenty of apps as well. Obviously, like Asana's got an app and Notion's an app, but there's probably apps out there that actually are goal-setting apps and KPI tracking apps as well. I don't use those. I do kind of just use like Asana for me personally, which I need to redo for next year. I haven't even thought about next year yet. This year has been pretty full on. But there's plenty of different things. So just have a Google or figure out what works for you. Some of those project management ones are quite helpful. I mean, I really liked Asana because you could, every time you ticked off a little thing, you got like a little hooray, a little flying unicorn or a little flying beaver or whatever. So I kind of liked that, but each their own. You can also just write it down in a book. Like there's nothing wrong with a diary. Just write down 2025 goals. Write down what you want to do, how you know you're going to achieve them, what KPIs for them, and then have a page for each one, and then go back to your diary each month or each week and build it into your schedule and sit down and think, okay, am I making progress on this one? Yes or no? If I'm not, how can I make progress on this one? Move on to the next page. Am I progressing on this one? Oh yes, I've been able to tick that one off. Tick it off. Once you've ticked off all of them, then you can celebrate or whatever. There's so many different ways that there's not really an excuse for not doing it. It's really time and knowing what you want. And if you don't know what you want, then maybe you do some soul searching and figure out what it is. Because in business, I have a strong belief that you get into it with kind of an idea of what you're wanting to achieve and put out there, and not just getting into it for the money. So if you're getting into business simply to make more money and not try and solve a problem or help people, from my point of view, you're in business for the wrong reason, because a lot of businesses take a very long time to even start making money, let alone good money, and only a small percentage of businesses get to be that really, really big company status that everybody will recognize your name. So if you're getting into it for that reason, maybe second think and rethink your values, which again, I've done an episode on your values and your mission and all that kind of stuff, and your branding. Because if you have a business and you're branding it, what are they working off to even know how they want to brand it? Because how are they reaching to your customer base? The customer's engaging with you because they want, you resonate with them for a reason. But that's onto a whole nother topic. I think that's it for the episode. We've gone through all 5 steps of goal setting, and I think if you follow these steps and really understand what you want and put some plans in place, make sure you're reviewing and looking back before you go forward, then I think you are well and truly set up to have a very successful 2025, even though there is a lot of uncertainty at the moment with how the US election has gone. I think, look, without goals, how do you even know where you're going to go? So I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Again, you can watch this on YouTube if you prefer, or you can listen on Spotify and a few other podcast platforms. I can't name them all. There's a couple, but Spotify, Apple, and obviously YouTube, you can watch the episode. Up to you where you want to listen. If you have any ideas of topics you want for next year, send them through. We do have a Business Unboxed email address that I will have down in the description box, so you can send those through, and yeah, keep an eye out for what's going to happen next year, and we'll see you in the last episode for 2024, which will be in a fortnight's time, because I am then having December and at least January off, and then we'll see when we get back into it with the new podcast plan. So anywho, catch you in the next one.